Good afternoon. Please, can we settle down? We're about to start.
It must be a decent thing. I would have said it twice. It'd be as forceful as your big boss.
Start. Yeah. I think I'm gonna.
Sorry, I ran away.
Yeah.
No.
That's fine.
So we'll go up to number, I think there's 6 speakers. So fine.
Good afternoon and welcome to this important side event. My name is Wanga Tribi and I will be your moderator. Thank you for making the time and joining us today. I believe that all of us around this table are keenly aware of the scale of financing that is needed to achieve sustainable development goals as well as our NDCs. If we look at the current climate financing, I think it's quite evident that the flows are less than half of what is required. And so there is a significant shortfall in terms of adaptation finance. These financing needs should also be considered in the context of the 4 challenges. First one being that adaptation remains severely underfunded. Second being that the high borrowing costs for developing countries. Thirdly being the significant private sector investment gaps that currently exist. And lastly being the slow disbursement of climate change funds. And so it is within this context that our discussion today will be focused on enhancing cooperation among the public development banks and other development financing institutions on climate finance programs. We will have special focus on co-financing challenges and opportunities that will be shared amongst our speakers today. And so given the context of the climate financing gap, better cooperation among financial institutions has actually become a necessity. And so the FIX Summit today offers us a very unique opportunity to advance this discussion, given the broad representation of over 500 financial institutions and also with national development banks, MDBs, vertical and environmental funds, as well as other international development financing organizations that are here today. And as the G20 president for 2025, South Africa has also taken the opportunity to bring together the key stakeholders in the global sustainable finance architecture under the representatives of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group. Since 2016, this working group has actively contributed towards advancing private and public sustainable finance. And therefore, we believe that this joint G20 and FIX Summit event provides the platform for us to share experiences and ideas on how we can improve coordination as well as cooperation to scale up sustainable finance. And so today we have the privilege to have a diverse range of high-level speakers that have joined us today. And I look forward to the rich and insightful discussions that we'll be having today. And as your moderator, I'd like to take you through in terms of how the session will be conducted. We will open our discussions with some opening remarks and intervention from the Deputy Minister of Finance of the Republic of South Africa, Dr. David Masondo. And in this context, I think it's quite important to say that climate change is indeed an important issue for South Africa's G20 presidency, but it is also an issue that poses a significant risk for our country's economy. And so we appreciate the Deputy Minister of Finance being here with us today, and I look forward to his remarks. Following the Deputy Minister's remarks, we'll proceed to a roundtable discussion composed of an impressive list of the following speakers, and they will intervene in the following process. We have two speakers from the National Development Banks. We have Mr. Lebogang Siperepere, who is the Group Executive from the DBSA. We also have Mr. Javier Diaz, who is the former CEO of Bankeldex. They will share with us perspectives from the NDBs operating from 2 different regions of Africa and also Latin America. So those will be the first 2 speakers that will intervene. And after that, we'll have Mr. Anthony Nyong from the AFDB in the roundtable. AFDB is indeed a very committed funder in Africa for development priorities, including for climate change. So it will be quite interesting to get their views around some challenges and opportunities that are in Africa. We will also have Ms. Mafalda Duarte, the Executive Director of the Green Climate Fund. And I think it's also quite important to say that we also recognize that the GCF as an important source of climate finance for developing countries in general. Post that, we'll also hear from Sir Danny Alexander from HSBC, who will give us a perspective from a commercial on climate finance projects and transactions. So he'll take us through some of the experiences and some of the opportunities that currently exist. And lastly, we're going to hear from philanthropies that are becoming, because what we've seen is that philanthropies definitely are becoming a significant channel for funding for climate change projects, and especially for developing countries. And from that perspective, we're going to have Mr. Wu Chang from the Global Energy Alliance for People and the Planet. Each member of the roundtable will be given 7 minutes to share the views on the challenges and opportunities of cooperation to advance climate change projects. Some panel members might share case studies of cooperation and co-financing by the institutions. This is really to provide us with concrete experiences and lessons learned. Following the interventions from the speakers, we will have around 25 minutes for Q&As, where we'll open it up online and also to the colleagues that have joined us here to pose any questions to the panel. And then lastly, we'll bring in our joint FIX and G20 event to a closure, where we will have Mr. Remy Ruth, the chair of FIX, followed by Mr. Wang Xin from the People's Bank of China, who also serves as one of the co-chairs of the G20 SFWG to close off the event. And so I will hand over to our Deputy Minister of Finance to give us opening remarks. Thank you.
fiscal constraints to address their own developmental challenges and climate change challenges. Now, with their wider global reach, influence, as well as their strong developmental finance capabilities, members of the FICS have a critical role to contribute towards closing this finance gap. FICS should enable South Africa to achieve its G20 presidency thematic goals, namely solidarity, equality, and sustainability. As South Africa, we intend to use our G20 presidency to A, reinforce solidarity by strengthening multilateral system. B, advocate for equality to achieve the SDG. 3, ensure sustainability through proactive measures aimed at addressing the negative effects of climate change. It is in this context that we see FICS as a critical stakeholder for us during our G20 presidency for 3 reasons. Firstly, FICS brings together more than 500 public development banks. 2, FICS contribute 10% to the total annual global investment. 3, FICS has a collective balance sheet of over $23 trillion in assets. Our side event today is really timely. This event will make a contribution to the climate finance discussions in the G20 framework as led by the Sustainable Finance Working Group. This group facilitates dialogues amongst G20 member countries on global efforts to close the climate finance gap for the benefit of the world and most especially developing countries. The 3 priorities that this year under the South African G20 presidency are enhancing coordination of different stakeholders within the global sustainable finance architecture, scaling up funding for adaptation and improving the functioning of carbon markets. The topic of our discussion this afternoon is linked to the first priority of enhancing the functioning of the global sustainable finance architecture. The objective is to improve the collaboration between key financial institutions, namely multilateral development banks, national development banks, vertical climate and environmental funds, and development finance institutions. The current fragmented approach by these important financial institutions results in duplicated efforts, unnecessary administrative burdens on the government of developing countries, and leads to missed investment opportunities. We do recognize that any efforts must be pursued within the context of respecting independent institutional governance and framework. However, we see that a better coordinated and an inclusive global approach should unlock institutional barriers and encourage cooperation. Better cooperation should include, in particular, increased co-financing, better technical cooperation, and enhanced knowledge sharing. We have seen the power of cooperation in our own Just Transition program in South Africa, where various global partners and funders have come together within a country platform showcasing an impressive commitment of $12 billion under our Just Energy Transition Partnership. In addition, as South Africa, we have continued to stress in global platforms the importance of removing frictions which complicate or reduce the amount of capital available for climate-related investments. South Africa, working together with the IFC, chairs the working stream of Sustainable Banking Finance Network to promote interoperability of taxonomies in various emerging and advanced economies, and also to simplify and standardize how these classification systems of green investment work. A clear additional requirement is extending interoperability to the various internal classification systems used by various vertical climate funds, MDBs, NDBs, as well as private funders. Today, we are privileged to have all important stakeholders for our roundtable discussion. I look forward to them in sharing case studies, experiences, and insights on cooperation amongst public development banks. The perspectives of multilateral development banks is important, as these institutions have a relatively larger balance sheets and have vast experience of working in multiple regions and countries. I'm therefore looking forward to the views of the AFDB representative in this discussion. Moreover, while many development finance institutions have to manage multiple priorities, vertical climate and environmental funds have the advantage of focusing on climate change. The green climate finance has been at the forefront of important innovations in climate finance. Therefore, the insights from the green climate finance representatives will be very critical for these discussions. National development banks, with DBSA as an example in South Africa, tend to have better and nuanced understanding of country contexts and conditions and are closer to policymakers. Their contribution to sustainable development and climate change discussion, especially on matters related to adaptation, is very important. As I said earlier, given the scale of funding needs and limited fiscal space faced by our governments, we are increasingly counting on private capital to play even a bigger role in funding climate change programs. We therefore need to address key policy and regulatory challenges to unlock additional private sector funding to critical areas such as renewable energy for energy access. We also have to design appropriate instrument and right incentives to scale up private capital funding for adaptation projects. To conclude, I wish to reiterate the importance of the G20 and FIX partnership under the South African G20 president. Today's discussion should serve as another important moment and step towards much needed cooperation among global development institutions in the light of the challenges that we're facing in fighting against climate change. I thank you.
Thank you to the Deputy Minister of Finance for his opening remarks. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of climate change and also explaining how this fits perfectly well within South Africa's G20 presidency, and also not forgetting the importance of collaborating with institutions such as the FIX. So thank you so much, DM. We appreciate your time. We'll move forward with the first few interventions. In this order, please, we'll have, and please do remain seated while you have your, put through your intervention. So the first would be Mr. Lebogang Siperepere, who is the Group Executive from the DBSA, and after that we'll have Mr. Javier Diaz from the former CEO of Bancodex. Following that, we have Mr. Anthony Nyong from the AFDB, Ms. Mafalda Duarte, Sir Danny Alexander from HSBC, and then lastly we have Mr. Wu Chang from Global Energy Alliance for People and the Planet. Thank you.
Thank you, Wanga, and thanks. I don't have to stand up and people don't have to feel intimidated. On a much more serious note, I think this week I've had an opportunity to sit within the country platform exchange and also sit in the FIX forum, and today we're sitting on the collaboration between FIX and G20. And one of the things that I take away as my opening remark is that the convergence between climate finance and infrastructure development is starting to come together. I think it's a critical element, I think, insofar as the cooperation as it starts, we're starting to align insofar as how do we then start to see climate finance in relation to infrastructure development, and particularly within the context of Africa, because the two are inseparable, in my view. And I'm quite pleased that we're starting to see that convergence in my view, and hoping that out of this conversation, which I hope, and I think the reason why it's a side event, I think it may probably, it has an opportunity or potential of stealing the thunder insofar as the FIX is concerned, because it's quite a critical conversation, and for me, I wish it at some point we can have it open within this context. To move in further, it goes without saying, in my view, that it is of importance that the cooperation within the various parties it's required, being it from a policy point of view with governments, being it within the finance MDBs and the private sector. It goes without saying, and there are various opportunities and advantages in our view. The impact is immense that you start to see once you start to have an effort around collaboration, and we've seen in various efforts, and I'll speak to examples as I move along within the South African context. In terms of the policy framework, and in much more recent, I think, years or days or months, we've been working with from DBSA, World Bank, and the National Treasury, working on developing an instrument, a guarantee instrument to support the transmission infrastructure. As the Deputy Minister has highlighted, we're running out of headway insofar as the fiscal limits, and therefore this cooperation, and so it is important in that regard. The Deputy Minister further speaks about the fragmentation, and therefore, if we then continue to engage collaboratively as various stakeholders, it will reduce that, and with that, we then start to realize that some of the benefits. We then talk to some of the elements around the potential risks that may exist. And if we don't collaborate, we contribute towards those risks because we are uncoordinated in our view. And we further, so those are some of the advantages that I want to raise in terms of why the need for collaboration. But I do believe that I'm preaching to the converted in this room. Some of the views that we have around what are the things that we then can do at a practical level in so far for us to achieve the objectives that we're looking to. And as the Deputy Minister spoke about the objectives that we have as South Africa being the presidency, holding the presidency for the G20 this financial year around sustainability, solidarity and equality. And we've done very well in this regard around talking to the standardized approach. We come a long way with, and I'll start with it from an infrastructure point of view. We've had the REAP renewable energy program wherein we've procured just over 7,000 megawatts of renewable energy, and we could not have done this without having a standardized approach, and which has enabled private sector to participate in the main, and we've done that well, and we are about to replicate that again with the potential development of about 14,000 kilometers in the transmission frame. We've taken a similar approach from a standardized approach insofar as the water partnerships, and we'll talk to a clear example that we're looking for. We do have pockets of success. I've spoken to the initiative that we have with the government and the World Bank around the guarantee. So standardizing is of critical importance in our view, and it will help us to realize the benefits in that regard. That being said, there's a very important role that we need to play around capacity building in various markets that we are engaging in that regard, because we have to acknowledge that we're bringing in or proposing a new way of thinking. I don't think there's an issue around collaboration and cooperation, but with every change and I think this brings in a change in the way that we do work from our various platforms. So it is important we take with our parties that we're looking to benefit. In the first, from our point, communities need to benefit. If we're working on water projects, communities need to benefit, and policymakers are at the center, even in our case at a local government, and therefore that means that you need to take, there's a lot of capacity development that you need to do in that regard. I spoke about the country platforms, the importance that they have. They present a dialogue, an opportunity for us to have a dialogue. And some of the conversations that we're having in at least on the side was that how do we then start to bring the conversations to reality, and so that they just don't end up as conversations. And similarly in this conversation, these are important. We need to, in our view, we need to have actionable items that we can hold ourselves accountable year in, year out, and as we meet in various fora, so that we then can measure the impact that we have in that regard. So the country platforms are of critical importance in enabling us to move forward as it were. And moving towards closure, Program Director, I'll speak to the case studies that we've had. And in my presentation, I spoke about the renewable energy. We currently looking into rail. We've got good partnerships, GCF being amongst one of the key stakeholders that we have within the climate finance, as it were, and we're working closely with them with a facility that we have that is earmarked for water partnerships, and which is dedicated specifically for the water reuse. And scarce water country, this becomes critical. And we have certain sectors in our country in which our GDP is still heavily dependent on. For example, we've got the mining that plays a critical role in our role. So this program is of paramount importance, and this is one of the key opportunities that we have. And similarly, we've got a partnership with, with GCF on the Egypt side of things. So we do have, as I indicated, pockets of success in terms of what are the examples that we can do to confirm and ensure that we build up on the initiatives around collaboration and interoperability in that regard. With that, Chair, I just want to thank you for this opportunity that you've given us, and we just want to further emphasize that it goes without saying that we need to work together so that we can achieve the climate objectives, and also we can achieve within the African context our objectives to deliver on the much needed infrastructure. And infrastructure plays a critical role in catalyzing and eradicating poverty that we have, in ensuring that we can take everyone with as we move along. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lebohang. Much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for this invitation. My name is Javier Diaz, and up until 2 weeks ago, I was the CEO of Bancoldex, Colombia's business development bank, and I currently serve as Special Envoy to Finance in Common. So it's a great honor and a privilege to be here with you. I intend to use my time to share with you the preliminary findings of a survey that the International Development Finance Club has been working on. And they are very preliminary, but I think that they are very enlightening in terms of the road going forward for a new financial architecture. But before I do that, just a word on FIX and IDFC. You may or may not know this, but the International Development Finance Club is made up of 27 public development banks. It has been around since 2012. And Finance in Common started as a, if you will, a second product coming out of the IDFC. So the IDFC tends to be the permanent forum where the public development banks meet. And then Finance in Common, now in its 5th edition, has become the greater forum for all these wonderful ideas. And the reason why I bring this up is because I think that further collaboration between IDFC and FIX will only provide better results for the task that we have ahead of us. Now, at the heart of the IDFC, we have started a survey which we have titled The Role of Public Development Banks in the New Global Financial Architecture. And as the title suggests, what we are trying to do is to ask public development banks what they should prioritize, what they should be thinking about, and what they would be proposing in terms of this new roadmap that is being built on the road to Seville and further on. I will briefly mention the 10 respondents that we have so far. I think it's a small number, but it's very representative geographically, at least. So from Latin America, we have NAFIN of Mexico, Bancoldex of Colombia, BNDES of Brazil, and of course the CAF, the Latin American Development Bank for Latin America. From Europe, we have KfW, we have AFD from France, we have HBOR from Croatia, CDP of Italy, and we have TSKB from Turkey. And apologies, I neglected BCEF from Argentina. So these initial 10 respondents will actually be complemented by the 27 members of the IDFC, and hopefully we will take this exercise to a much broader base of PDBs. So let me start by sharing a first, and I apologize if I read the questions, but I think it's probably easier. The first thing we asked was, in the context of a new international financial architecture, what topics does your entity consider should be prioritized? First answer is adjustment of risk ratings for development banks. And this goes to the heart of the question. Public development banks, whether multilateral or whether national, actually think that regulation should be different. Now, how different and in what terms, I think that's where we're going. But the first answer is, again, adjustment of risk ratings. Second answer is reducing the cost of capital, which is pretty obvious if you think about it. But on the other hand, the question is how, because we represent different geographies with different risk profiles. But at the top of mind of these institutions is reducing the cost of capital. Then there is the question of building a better relationship between PDBs and local governments and the private sector. Again, sounds obvious, but this is to highlight what drives these institutions. And then finally, as a overarching topic, we need to build better regional frameworks. Because as the Deputy Minister was pointing out, we tend to think about our aggregate balance sheet, but we have to move from aggregate to intertwining. We have to work together. It's not going to do the trick anymore just to have a big balance sheet, which is an aggregation. And then I'll jump to other topics. Again, to the cost of capital, and again, this is at the heart of the discussion. 86% of respondents have subsidized interest rates for their clients, and they are mostly financed by government transfers. We have been discussing for the past 2 days, and I guess for the past time, that this is going to be unsustainable going forward. Governments will prioritize their budgets in a different way. I hope not in terms of too much defense in suffering of interest rates, but going forward, the world will be different in terms of how we provide money to our clients. When we have relied on government subsidies, it has been probably a good thing, but it's not going to be the same thing going forward. I can speak about the experience of Bancolix, where every year we used to get less and less transfers from the central government, and that made us change the business model to a market pricing, but then relying on different instruments like grace periods and tenors and so forth. But again, 86% of us rely on subsidies, and that is very difficult to sustain going forward. Again, I already mentioned the terms of different regulation. And let me just, again, to leeway into the finalization, read some of the other conclusions that I think are very illuminating in this regard. Respondents were asked, what are the most important challenges for your institution in the future? And again, I will read, improving risk management capacity, diversifying business operations, gaining more flexibility to hire and retain highly qualified personnel, improving corporate governance and transparency, improving loan recovery rates, becoming financially self-sustainable, reducing undue political interference. I don't know how that's going to be managed, but, and then building a better bond framework. And then the final list of answers that I will read goes as follows. Respondents were asked, what role could your institution play in the new international financial architecture? And the answers go as follows. Committing to more sustainability and inclusive development, working on transitioning to low-carbon economies, investing in renewable energy and biodiversity, again, building strong collaborative networks, and advocating for a deep reform of the international financial architecture. So I will probably stop here and try and conclude that the world as we've known it, in terms of subsidies and subsidized interest rates, is changing dramatically. So the business model of the public development banks has to change accordingly. And the way to go about it is with deeper collaboration among members. So again, thank you for my time. I think I have 20 seconds or so, but I'll probably stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Javier. Mr. Anthony?
Thank you very much, Mr. Javier. Sets a tough point going forward. Thank you very much, moderator. And I'll be speaking as an MDB representative in how we operate or collaborate with the NDBs, and so on. And we know that if there's any region that really needs more of this climate attention, is Africa. As at last year, 9 out of 10 of the most vulnerable countries in the world are in Africa, and we get just about 23% of the needs that we have. So we also believe that The NDBs and the multilateral development banks share a common vision. We all want to finance sustainable development. We all want to ensure that we build resilience in our society. But to do this means we need to work together. There has to be strengthened interoperability if we have to achieve this and generate the resources that we need. The MDBs and the national development banks will come from two very different perspectives, but they all meet together. While the MDBs come with global large-scale financing, global expertise, and international best practices, the national development banks have the local knowledge, on-the-ground networks, and the ability to channel funding to where it's needed most. That poses a challenge to us as MDBs, but we need to be able to come together to benefit from this. The MDBs have a long history of working together with national development banks. I'll give you two instances. One is where the World Bank, the European Investment Bank, the African Development Bank, KfW, AFD, and the Climate Investment Funds came together and raised concessional funding in 2013, blended this with local DFIs to develop one of the world's largest concentrated solar plants on Earth. And that was a kudos to, to everyone working together. The same applies to building the largest wind farm in Africa, the Lake Turkana. Partners came together, including PDBs, So it's not new. And then the African Development Bank and the Trade and Development Bank, TDB, partnered to expand electricity access to rural communities in Kenya in what we call the last mile connectivity. This collaboration resulted in 1.5 million connections, electricity connections, and at the same time, through the partnership, we were able to reduce financing costs that allowed for quicker project execution through TDB's networks. So there are advantages there. But however, let me also mention that with these advantages, there are also some challenges that we have. And some of these challenges have been the subject of discussions throughout the week, here. We know those challenges. We talk about the different mandates of the institutions, our varying risk appetites, the information asymmetry, and the capacity gaps, not just technical capacity, but the financial capacity gaps that we have. Especially in Africa, most of our national development banks are so poorly resourced, and we need to do something about that. But what is it that we're doing as MDBs to address these issues? This summit is a summit of solutions, and we want to see what solutions can be preferred, which is working. On standardization, I want to note that the MDBs and members of the IDFC are harmonizing their approaches to climate finance tracking, as well as on a range of non-financial output metrics. This is very important. So we are getting to that point that we're beginning to harmonize initiatives. Then there is also the capacity building and technical assistance that we are offering. Many MDBs are providing direct technical assistance, training programs, advisory services to help national development banks where they need it most. We always call them our younger brothers. We hold their hands and so on. But then I'll give you an instance. The African Development Bank's initiative, established by the African Development Bank, is providing direct support to scale national banks' investments in sustainable green projects. For instance, the African Development Bank is providing technical assistance for the creation, or provided technical assistance for the creation of the Rwanda Green Investment Fund, which raised capital from the Green Climate Fund, the African Development Bank, and several DFIs. Capacity building for green banking is underway as we speak in Benin Republic and Cote d'Ivoire, and starting soon in Morocco, Egypt, and Kenya. That's looking at what we are doing to support the NDBs. But we also realize that if we don't do it ourselves, we also have issues. The challenges don't belong only to the NDBs. We also need to put our house in order. And for that, we've created collaboration platforms. Last year, 10 MDBs met and established the collaborative platform with two components. One is a digital co-financing platform that allows people to put partners to store or put their projects in their pipeline of projects. Then the second component is a co-financing platform that allows people to come together to discuss important issues. My only hope is that it extends eventually to the national development banks. Then we also are implementing mutual reliance frameworks, which several MDBs have signed on, that we don't have to duplicate or triplicate issues. We can depend on the frameworks of our partner institutions, and we want to see that also among the national development banks. And in conclusion, let me state here that to enhance interoperability, MDBs and the national development banks must continue to improve harmonization efforts, invest in digital platforms for seamless collaboration, and work towards unified financial and reporting standards. A well-integrated system will enable MDBs and NDBs to mobilize large amounts of finance efficiently and ultimately drive sustainable development. Let me also close by saying that the Climate Policy Institute, the African Development Bank, and FIX is working on a document that will explain this in more detail. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. We will move to Sir Danny Alexander, and then we'll move Ms. Mafalda to the end of the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, and it's a great pleasure to be here. Not least because I recently moved from the AIB, which is one of the co-hosts of this, to join HSBC, and so it's great to see this event such a wonderful success. And I think it's important also that the private sector voice is really heard in these conversations, because we know that there are multi-trillion dollars of investments that need to be unlocked in order to deliver on the goals related to the net zero transition. And to achieve that, this issue has to be perhaps transition from being a major talking point in among governments and politicians to being a commercial opportunity and seen as primarily as that. And how public development banks and MDBs deploy their resources and capital is a critical part of how that is achieved, because while there is an abundance of capital across global markets, there are not enough projects that meet the investment risk appetite for private sector investors. Well, that varies a lot according to investor class and so forth. I think nonetheless, as a general statement, it is true. And especially in developing economies where the spectrum of bankability means that many situations struggle to attract commercial financing. At HSBC, I'm leading HSBC Infrastructure Finance and Sustainability, and we have an ambitious plan to grow our infrastructure and sustainability financing very substantially over the next few years. We want to find more flexible ways to manage counterparty risks and to structure transactions at crowd-in financing. And again, relations with MDBs and public development banks are going to be a key part of that strategy. In HSBC's case, the scale of our balance sheet gives us access to high-profile projects and sponsors, and we want to connect them with our network of clients across the globe. So let me give a few case studies that I think may be relevant, structures that unlock capital in situations that may not typically meet our risk-return hurdles, or that crowd in private investors who would not otherwise have access to these opportunities. For example, number one, public sector guarantees that promote balanced risk allocation between investors. We helped Egypt issue its first sustainable panda bond, raising 3.5 billion RMB, backed by the African Development Bank and the AIB's partial credit guarantees. We worked on the 95% MIGA-backed sustainable term loan facility to fund green and social projects financed by BOAD in West African countries. And actually, HSBC also worked with MIGA to receive a $1.85 billion guarantee from MIGA to provide some regulatory capital relief for our Mexican subsidiary, where that resources freed up were then allocated towards eligible climate finance projects. We collaborate closely with export credit agencies in the energy transition. For example, financing related to Reliance New Solar Energy Limited, I should say, in India, for 100 gigawatt renewable energy generation capex in that country, backed by guarantees from export credit agencies. And it's interesting to note that I think MDBs and PDBs and their guarantee products could learn from the experience of export credit agencies, especially because for banks, ECA backing also offers strong benefits in terms of regulatory relief, which isn't necessarily applied to those guarantees from public development banks. So there's room for improvement there. In the capital markets also, recently, at the end of last year, we acted as sole bookrunner for the World Bank Amazon Reforestation-linked outcome bond, a $225 million transaction that released $36 million for MOMBAC to fund reforestation activities in the Amazon. It's the first ever carbon removal credit-backed financing in the international debt capital markets. Hopefully others will follow. We also supported the inaugural CIF CCMM bond, that is the Climate Investment Fund's capital markets mechanism, the debt issuance vehicle of the clean technology funds. And these are transactions that help through the capital markets to direct resources, private sector resources, towards the kind of activities that we are discussing. I think partnerships also play a critical role in catalyzing progress, and HSBC has an experience in and also a desire to do more to develop innovative blended finance solutions to channel more infrastructure financing into emerging markets. For example, our partnership with Breakthrough Energy has offered us the chance to finance some of the key technologies required for the transition. Pentagreen Capital, our joint venture with Temasek, that will manage part of the Singapore government's FAST-P program, the Green Investments Partnership, which seeks to deploy $1 billion for sustainable infrastructure in Asia, but focused on transactions that would be regarded as marginally bankable. So through a blended finance platform, we can bring more transactions to bankability than otherwise would have been the case. I think this kind of partnership can be very, very valuable indeed. And I would also highlight the importance of the project preparation activities of PDBs and MDBs, because project preparation costs are approximately twice as high in emerging markets as they are in developed markets. And so the role of public sector institutions to support project preparation is critical to bringing more projects to bankability. Likewise, in emerging markets, the work that PDBs do to support policy development is also very important. Having the right policy frameworks can be a key differentiator in terms of attracting private capital. So I think the agenda should be to simplify and standardize, as others have said, but also to more rapidly share what works. This Financing Common Network is a good platform for that. To more quickly scale up those initiatives that are successful, and then to ensure that the appropriate support for those is provided through PDBs, MDBs, and also financial regulators, which would help then to bring more private sector resources more quickly to meet these global challenges. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Danny. We can move to Mr. Wu Chang. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Just like Sir Danny, I moved from one of the MDBs over to my new role in the philanthropy, so many of us are kind of disguised as somebody else. But what that says is that I think you will get much more cooperation from the MDBs now that we have so many people from the former MD space to be working from the different angles. So just in case you're not that familiar with our organization, it's the Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet. The Deputy Minister mentioned something about power of cooperation or collaboration. And that really resonated with me because we call ourselves GEAP, the short for Global Energy Alliance. We were created about 3.5 years ago to do exactly that. We were initially backed by Rockefeller, IKEA, and Bezos Fund. And we are working with about 50 plus partners across the world, involving public, private, and multilateral and philanthropies as well. Our mandate is to, by 2030, provide access to clean energy to about 1 billion people, reduce 4 gigatons of CO2 emissions, and provide 150 million jobs, green jobs, livelihoods across the world. That's a big task for any single organization. Therefore, we are pushing for alliancing. So we hear about various opportunities, and one of the things I'm trying to do in this FIC is to bring in some sense of optimism as well, because things might not be as bad as you think. So I want to talk about one such powerful collaboration a few years ago, and I'll let you guess how long ago that was. So there was a project, a big hydropower project in Laos. It was 1,000 megawatts, required $1.5 billion. At the time, Laos was HIPC eligible country. So how are you going to make this happen? And this was a collaboration between Asian Development Bank, World Bank. AFD was a key partner, and the sponsor was the Électricité de France, and a few others joined. And at the end of the day, they were able to mobilize $1.5 billion, of which $600 million equity and $900 million debt. The debt came from commercial banks, half of them international, half of them from local. Again, it's a poor country, so much risk, a huge project. It actually happened because of the collaboration. People really identified what the problems are and brought in instruments that were available. For example, political risk guarantee from the MDBs for the commercial borrowing. And then, more importantly, airtight project preparation, having enough expertise to do all the legal agreements, concession agreements, and PPA, and so on and so forth. So it happened. So far, it's been running really well. And this deal happened 20 years ago. Now, since then, exactly 20 years ago, 2005, if we fast forward 2025, 20 years later, you have so many more instruments and players. You have the vertical funds, you have GCF, AIB came on board, huge discussion about the national development banks. In fact, we are working with the AFD to support and empower the national development banks for them to be able to manage these kind of processes. And we also have, back then there was no blended financing, no local currency financing, and so on and so forth. So we have a tremendous opportunity only if we collaborate. So what we are trying to do from the GEAP perspective is work across different stakeholders. And for example, in Africa, there's a huge potential for hydropower, many gigawatts worth of investment potential. But again, the risk is quite high, right, from the perspective of investors. So IFC and we are working on creating some sort of platform where we can crowd in all different players so that we can identify all the hydro potentials and then be able to provide support at the country level and at the project level to be able to make these projects bankable for from the private sector investors' perspective. So this is still in a nascent stage. Lots of discussions happening, and I hope that I will engage in the FIC moving forward so that we can report to you how this is developing. And this is probably the most interesting proposal that's coming through. And please do work with us. And from philanthropy space, I forgot to mention the new players. In addition to NDBs and all that, philanthropies are really awakening. Perhaps because of the current situation even more, so many philanthropies are eager to double down and do more in this development space. I did notice from working from the MDB with the philanthropies and even after I joined, just like any other group of organizations, we can collaborate much, much better. So my dream is for philanthropies to become a big block of very powerful voice and financing so that we can do more. And the key thing that philanthropies can do with money that's much less than MDBs is that flexibility in the way we can use. So when the MDBs and others discuss about potential investment opportunity, there are certain investments that you cannot take, for example, first loss, because of the risk profile that you're set up with. Philanthropies can, not with a huge amount of money, but we can take the position to demonstrate so that we can unlock the huge stack of financing that can be mobilized. So we are very much looking forward to working with this group and beyond. And please do keep us informed. Just to close off, Danny was the one, I think he agreed to co-host the AAIB, right? Now, before that, Remy came to me when I was in ADB, and I said, there's a great guy named Danny who can co-sponsor with you. So both of us had something to do with it, but we are both no longer in the organization. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Wu Chong. Unfortunately, Ms. Mafalda could not join us. However, we've got Ellen Bovilla, I hope I'm not butchering your surname, who is the Director for Strategy at the Greek Climate Fund. So he would give his intervention. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Excellencies, colleagues, partners. We all have heard the African proverb, if we want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. But in climate finance, we must go both fast and far. And we need financial institutions to align behind sustainable development, using all levers at their disposal to finance it. And to achieve this, no one is better positioned than the public and national development banks. As of today, PDB manage $23 trillion in assets, a sum that could move markets and unlock investment at a scale unseen in our history. They already provide more than half of all climate finance worldwide. And beyond their financial power, their local expertise, their networks, and their instruments are also unique. But our approach has been fragmented, chaotic, and inefficient so far. We are not leveraging the PDBs to the best advantage. This is not just inefficient, it's a huge loss. When joining up, the PDBs, the multilateral development banks, as well as the retail, universal, and postal bank, represent altogether a combined asset of $55 trillion. So the question is, how do we get them to leverage their unique capability better and together? Let me start by speaking of our experience at the Green Climate Fund. GCF is now focused on implementing an ambitious reform agenda to help the fund manage at least $50 billion by 2030, efficiently and with maximum impact on the ground. This 50 by 30 agenda is a roadmap to mobilize more private capital, streamline access to finance, and shift from scattered one-off projects to more ambitious country-led programs. And we already see some results of this effort. Just last week, our board approved almost $700 million in new commitments for 11 projects, and 6 of them are already going straight into implementation. In terms of efficiency, we have already cut the median time from project approval to first disbursement to 4.5 months, and we are now working to move projects from concept note to board approval within 6 months or less. Why do I want to mention that here? Because we see PDBs as critical partners in this effort, and our ability to deliver at speed and scale for them is absolutely crucial. Among our 139 accredited entities, around 90 are local partners, what we call direct access entities, including many PDBs. In fact, 40% of our portfolio is implemented by national and regional development banks. And we have committed to double the number of direct access entities receiving funding through the Green Climate Fund, with an increased focus on PDBs. We're also making access to GCF funding even easier. We have introduced now a new operational structure divided into regions, so that institutions like the PDBs can be supported at regional and local level to receive tailored investment and technical assistance. But we know this is not enough. In our work with PDBs, we have seen firsthand the challenge they are facing. Firstly, we need to help PDBs tackle the capacity constraints. That is why we launched a readiness program. This is the largest climate-focused capacity building program in the world, with 500 million in grant financing, and this is to support the development of PDBs capacity. Through this finance and technical assistance, we can support PDBs to open up space for this ambition. For example, in Brazil, our readiness program supported the development of the Climate and Ecological Transformation Investment Platform, the so-called BIP platform, that was launched last year at the annual meetings in Washington. This country platform is designed to align public and private finance to accelerate green investment. It is just starting now, but we are very excited to see it delivering project pipeline aligned with national climate goals. Secondly, we need also to help PDBs navigate the different institutional mandates and frameworks between the institutions. Multilateral climate funds have long-term climate-resilient investment criteria, contrasting with the short-term funding cycle and stringent risk assessment framework typical of PDBs. This sounds small, but the divergence can be significant in terms of strategic priorities, reporting standards, decision-making process, especially in absence of harmonized data systems. A good example is a project we are very proud of now. In South Africa, 1.5 billion climate resilience through water reuse program, through which DBSA has turned water into a bankable asset class. This novel financing approach has grown in private sector financing from projects that were previously considered not investable. Finally, we need to help PDB deal with currency constraints. MDB can offer the access to international capital market to PDBs, who are limited by their low credit rating. Now, in return, NDBs can lend in local currency to minimize the risk of currency mismatch and ultimately reduce the cost of capital. But what could be an opportunity is often faced as a challenge, and here we can help. This is how we experience it in the development of another DBSA project in South Africa, the Climate Finance Facility. This facility is a first of its kind application based on the Green Bank model for emerging and developing markets. It will remove market barrier and unlock private sector capital for climate actions. There are challenges, without doubt, but there are also solutions. And when PDBs have the right mandate, tools and support, they are really game changers. Before I close, let me thank the AIB, the FD, and DBSA for convening this Finance in Commons Summit and for shining a light on the Public Development Bank agenda. I would like also to congratulate South Africa on its commitment to climate finance within its G20 presidency. Under their leadership, they have a golden opportunity to reshape finance and to move the needle toward greater inclusion and impact. PDB have an ally in the G20, and they certainly have a friend in the GCF. We have now a choice: tinker at the edge of a broken system or redesign it so that finance flow when it is needed. At GCF, we are fully committed to helping create an environment where other financial actors, especially PDBs, can thrive and serve the greater good. But this is bigger than one institution. PDBs will rely on the GCF, MDBs, other climate funds, CSO, private sector, and all stakeholders to align behind shared objective and behind a future that we can start building today and together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to all the panelists, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Bafundi Mahonoti. I am with the South African Reserve Bank. I'll just start by summarizing very quickly what the panelists here today said, and I think the aim of the conversation was very importantly to bring the key stakeholders together to explore some of the challenges and opportunities for public development banks to function more cohesively as a system. And as it became clear in the conversation, the focus of this was on enhancing interoperability, but also collaboration, because the conversation isn't just about infrastructure, it is also about partnership and mobilizing funding. The opening remarks by the Deputy Minister and my co-moderator here, Wanga, highlighted some of the key issues related to this. And I think what's also important from their intervention was to highlight how this conversation is tightly linked to the agenda of the Sustainable Finance Working Group of the G20, where we're focusing on collaboration and scaling up finance, including for adaptation purposes. Now, in a world where government funding is limited, as it were, I think augmenting climate finance through collaboration with the private sector becomes an important focus area. The need for this collaboration, I was encouraged to pick up from this discussion among these panelists, that it is not only or not exclusively driven by governments. I think one of the key takeaways from the survey that was referenced earlier was that it flagged collaboration as one of the key takeaways from the work that had been done. I think some of the earlier speakers also highlighted the impact that collaboration has. One, that it creates opportunities to address fragmentation within an ecosystem. I think what was also quite interesting from the intervention from an MDB perspective was recognition that national development banks are much closer to the ground and have a much better understanding of the needs and priorities of the countries within which they operate, and so that they have a meaningful role to play in this collaborative effort to make sure that any form of financing or priorities coming from an MDB perspective are much better aligned to the priorities of individual countries. There was also, I think, this important point about bringing together expertise to ideate around how to address areas of common interest, which, as it were, are relatively new to all stakeholders. And I think this then links or dovetails nicely to some of the areas or specific areas of collaboration. And I've noted just a few of them here, one being around capacity building and the provision of technical assistance. That was one of the keywords that I think was mentioned by almost all the panelists. The other one was risk, and thinking how risk methods, risk measurement, and risk ratings are recalibrated as the way we think about climate finance is slightly different from how we've been thinking about finance more broadly. Another specific area for collaboration is thinking about business models. And I think the emphasis here was on cost and subsidies. And the last two that I'd just like to flag is around harmonizing approaches to climate finance and to think about investing in platforms where we allow co-funders, for example, to meet and collaborate and ideate some more about these issues. I think there were also very helpful examples or case studies. Lebogang spoke about the renewable energy program. In addition to that, we did hear about the role that public sector guarantees or the usefulness of public sector guarantees and how they contribute to dealing with the complex question around risk profiling and managing some of these climate change initiatives, especially to the extent that among the traditional funders, that the question or these issues make it less appetizing to provide more funding for such initiatives. As I draw to a close, I think it's useful that this conversation did not only emphasize interoperability in terms of an orderly functioning of an ecosystem, but also that it underscores the importance of partnership in finance mobilization. I did quite appreciate the reference to what we need to do if we want to go far. We need to go together. With that, let me wrap up, and we are now going to move to the second last session. We are quite pressed for time. This is now the question and answer session. So we have people who are joining us online. Please, if we can change the screen in front of us so we can allow that. But before I go to the to the questions, which will be open to the floor on the online platform, I'd like to invite the following 3 institutions, and they'll have anything between 1 and 2 minutes to just intervene quickly or ask questions. And that the first one is the IFAD. They will be followed by CPI, and then lastly the AECID. In that order, please. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much. So this is IFAD. Here I am. I don't have a question. I have like a comment I wanted to make. We heard a lot about energy and big infrastructure, a bit less on the agri-food system and the agricultural sector more in general. This is like something as IFAD we, of course, prioritize. But one specific aspect I would like to mention is on the smallholders that in all this discussion on climate finance, at the end of the day, they just get 1% of the overall climate finance that is available. And this is, of course, something that we need to work together also to raise the voice of those most vulnerable. IFAD is particularly, is working hard on adaptation, like almost 40% of our programs in the next 3 years will be on adaptation. So this is also for the South African friends. We are not part of the Sustainable Finance Working Group. This is an offer if you would like to take some of our expertise and some of these aspects into the work plan. In general, we have also something very powerful that is a baby of FIX, as I said yesterday during the executive committee. So we host in IFAD the Agri PDB platform. We heard a lot about technical assistance, capacity building. These is our areas for all PDBs and particularly for the one in the lowest income countries and the smallest one that are like fundamental to get access to finance. Otherwise, simply you don't get access to the finance available. And this Agri PDB is precisely doing that, and the angle on agroecology adaptation is one of the main. So there is a working group, and more working groups will come. We have more generosity coming from the Agence Française de Développement, more is coming from mobilization of JEF, European Union is supporting us, and 151 PDBs are in the coalition and in the platform. And this morning we had a meeting, and it's a story of success, and just to bring it to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. CPI?
Thank you so much for giving me the floor here. I just wanted to give a little bit more information on the work that we have been doing at CPI to support the G20 presidency and its members in the context of this priority 1. Tony already referred to it, but in partnership with AFDB, FIX, and with input from the Presidential Commission here in South Africa, DBSA and GFANS and others, we are developing a research paper that is really focused on enhancing collaboration between the vertical climate and environment funds, MDBs and NDBs to mobilize co-financing and also look at the important point that Danny mentioned, mobilize private finance for the G20 Sustainable Financing Working Group. We have been listening very closely. I think you've done a fantastic summary of the discussions and the inputs and the examples that we've heard from this panel here. But I did want to just share very quickly the main angles that we will be looking at the paper, in this paper, because this hopefully will also lead to others providing additional information to us. So we will be looking at the benefits, the challenges and the barriers to the collaboration between these different actors, but we will also be looking at how we can unlock that, so really focused on solutions like this summit is here, and how it will help to really achieve the global climate goals. We will also be looking at how this collaboration between the funds, MDBs and NDBs co-financing can leverage private finance. Where again, we will be looking, I think your examples are really helpful, Daniel, so we'll look at that. So we'll be looking also at specific de-risking mechanisms and also focusing on how can co-financing maximize the impact, which again is one of the topics that came up here. In addition to the co-financing aspects, we will also look at how the collaboration between these actors can actually help actually achieve more success in other areas such as capacity building, technical assistance, project preparation facilities. So again, we will be learning from actual projects and look forward to getting more input from all of you and reporting back to you.
Thank you very much. And lastly, AECID.
Hello, this is Anton Les. I'm the CEO of AECID, the Spain's development agency. Certainly interoperability is not the sexiest name ever, but what interoperability is about getting more effective and doing more with, I'm not sure less, but if you look at ODA budgets, if you look at the fiscal space in our partners in the Global South and so on, it doesn't seem that we are going to have much more resources in the years to come. But what we can do is to get better at what we do, and we have a very fragmented system, and interoperability is precisely about that. So the word is, again, not the sexiest, but if we talk about trust, that's indeed what is behind all of this. I think, and that's the beauty of FIX, is to create these win-win partnerships between our institutions, doing things together, also politically as well, acting as a group of actors in the north and in the south that are acting together for sustainable development. It's also about collaboration. As I said, we have a very fragmented system. Some of us are already taking some steps here, and Remy is here in JEFIC, among European public development banks. We are relying on one another to do joint transactions. All of us, we are too small for the challenges we have ahead of us, 4 billion a year in funding the SDGs. We need to work together. And frankly, we've also seen on the big IFIs, the MDBs, much more eagerness to work with one another. There are great examples, Latin America, in Africa, on energy access, for instance, and much more openness to discuss with those of us bilateral financial institutions. And then a word that is probably sexier than interoperability is leverage. If you look at the Addis document, and we will be hosting all of you in Seville, we are looking forward to the fourth conference in the summer. We have collectively failed to mobilize the billions. Let's be clear. We need to be much more concrete. There needs to be greater use of guarantees, but also other instruments. Technical assistance was mentioned, blending, first loss, like approximately 50% of our approvals on our financial arm are actually impact investment, and we are with 20 million, for instance, of Spanish development funds, we've been able to unlock 90 million of investment from private actors for resilient agriculture in Africa and other places, in collaboration with the Green Climate Fund and others. So interoperability means trust, it means collaboration, it means leverage, and I think that's what the pitch that we should be making in this, working together, finding concrete opportunities, but making a political pitch in the G20, and thank you, South African presidency, and beyond.
Thank you very much. We are at the end of our budgeted time, so please, if you can indulge us a little bit. I would now like to invite Remy to give his remarks. We budgeted 3 minutes for him. So please go ahead, Remy.
Good afternoon. I'm sorry I come late and I have to rush, so we will not listen to the questions and conclude the meeting I did not attend. But I see many friends in the room. Bafundi, Wanga, all of you, thanks a lot. I just want to really thank the G20 for the attention and the support. Thanks to the presidency. You invited me on Tuesday under the big tent to discuss with the deputies. That was much appreciated by all FIX, the whole FIX family, and now you're here to exchange with us about interoperability, and I even see public bankers disseminating Wuchong, Danny. Yes. It's very good, and I heard that DBSA, Bancoldex, this CPI, African Development Bank report. So we have now substance to share about interoperability. And so my main message is a huge thank, and just to say we have done well. I mean, for a decade. I mean, it's only 10 years since the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. So we have to be proud and resistant about what we have achieved. I mean, the ODA figures, the climate figures, have never been higher. So we've never been that strong, I would say, in the history of development and climate finance. So we have to measure that before, let's say, finding or criticizing ourselves. And build from that, build from the G20 MDB roadmap, which is excellent, and then of course address the challenging trends that are coming. Just a few of them. Of course, we see the resentment about the last mile, so we still have an issue about deployment. We see also national interests back in the discussion, which is good or bad, but this is here, changing the narrative. Multilateralism was strengthened, but somehow it fragmented as well. So this is a challenge. And the cost of capital, the risk perception is also still a very serious issue. And then maybe more broadly, I really feel from AFD that we are serving somehow competing frameworks and narratives. And for a time, it was helpful to raise the ambition. Probably this is turning around, and we would like, that's what we phrased somehow in the conclusions of this summit, to have a clearer, broader framework, especially coming from the G20 work, but also from FFD4. And last point, just to say that FIX want to provide answers, want to participate. So thanks. I heard Minister Massondo was very clear about it. So we will do our best for a framework that would be more ambitious, bringing more public and more private finance through financial engineering and the scarcity of public resources. So we have to innovate. We know that. A framework, a contribution that would provide more buy-in. So we believe that the country platforms are absolutely key in the architecture that is progressively emerging, structuring. And we want, of course, to interoperability in a new way. Our proposal here is really to see subject by subject if the G20 MDB roadmap could be extended, and for a number of willing, able, capable public development banks just to join to the GEMS database, to the CAF review, to the various exercises that are ongoing. So just to confirm and thank the G20 for that, and especially the Sustainable Finance Working Group. Thank you.
Thank you. Please pardon me for walking into your house and giving you a time budget. So we will now open the floor. So we'll take one round on the floor, one round online, and then we'll go to our panelists to respond to those questions. And that will be 1 minute per panelist, please. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Project Director, for the opportunity. My question is to GCF and the National Treasury. So to GCF, what I'd like to understand is, given the experience that we've had on the CFF, where we struggled with currency hedging, what changes have now been implemented within GCF in order to be able to lend to emerging markets in local currency? And to the National Treasury, my question is, given the important role that the National Treasury has in terms of financing infrastructure development in the municipalities, what initiatives are being undertaken in order to drive the climate action within municipalities and local government? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll note the National Treasury question for the Deputy Minister. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I am from Russia's State Development Corporation. So one question to the panelists and to the whole team. Yesterday, CEO of Bill Gates Fund rose very interesting questions. In principle, he said that blended finance is a good story. but it would be better if blended finance mechanism would be devoted for each of the sector of the economy separately. What do you think about this? For me, it was quite interesting idea, but I haven't come to any conclusion whether it would be possible or not to develop such kind of mechanism for each sector. In Russia, we use blended finance very actively, but it's a general approach, general machinery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any more hands on the floor? Perhaps we can go online. I don't see any hands online, so maybe if you do have your hand up, please feel free to switch on your mic. Oh, this is easy. Okay, let's go back to our panelists, and I'll start right at the top of the table. So, Anthony, thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Let me attempt the question from Russia. It depends, but I would think personally that an economy-wide blended finance would work. The reason being, each of these come with its own conditions, its own arrangements, and a country that has 6, 7, 8 sectors means you have to begin to deal with each of them individually. The idea is the money available or not? What I've always said about climate finance is it must satisfy 4 A's. The first, that the money must be available, must be adequate, and then must be accessible and must be affordable. And I think the blended finance can help us address those 4 in a particular situation, not just sectorally. Thank you.
I'm a bit skeptical about the concept of blended finance, because we seem to talk about it as if it were unified and everybody thought it was the same thing, but it's not. So sometimes blended finance refers to giving you certain technical assistance or certain sort of aid, but when you're in the books, sometimes it doesn't reflect a lower cost of capital. So again, when it effectively lowers your borrowing rate, I think blended finance is, someone is actually paying for that cheaper rate. When it's a diverse, diffuse sort of aid, I tend to hesitate about blended finance. So before speaking about different pockets of blended finance, I think we need to be much more acid on how it is defined and if it actually is working for what it's supposed to mean. Thank you.
Any more interventions from the panelists? Yes, please go ahead.
Maybe I can react to the question on the local currency, which is an excellent question because this is one of the major issues, generally speaking. I mentioned that in my introduction. We see the topic of local currency becoming extremely important, also in relation to the volatility of the market due to the geopolitical tension that we have, also in relation to the debt issue. As you know, the debt crisis is also very much fueled by the local currency depreciation that we see in some developing countries. And just to mark on this point, as of today, if you look at the least developed country, which is clearly a segment where the GCF is focusing on, 50% of them are in debt distress or close to debt distress. And for many, the local currency issue is one of the drivers. And this is also important for us because, as you know, we talk a lot about climate vulnerability, and it's clearly the focus for us at the GCF. But the climate vulnerability is also very much related to debt vulnerability. So we have more and more cases of our country which are facing this, what we call this double vulnerability, financial and climate. And this is the reason why now we want to focus on this local currency. We approach that in 2 ways. First, we want to de-risk within our own portfolio, our own balance sheet, basically our exposure to local currency. So we're working on hedging instruments, also with partners. This is one way. And the second thing is we are developing now instruments to lend basically money in local currency so that we are internalizing the local currency risk within the GCF. This is what the MDB have been working already. A good example is DBRD, for example. So either you do that with partners like TCX, for example, or you have within your own balance sheet a reserve in local currency. But for that, you need to be sufficiently diversified. And we are not yet at this stage. So when we'll go outside now, in terms of lending, we'll work with partners. to provide local currency solutions to our partners.
Thank you all very much. Let me now invite Wang Shen, who is the Director General of the Research Bureau of the People's Bank of China and the co-chair of the Sustainable Finance Working Group of the G20. He is going to close the session in 3 minutes, please. Welcome, Wang Shen.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. It's a pity that I cannot join you in person. But I do enjoy interventions and discussions. I want to appreciate the South African G20 presidency's important role in promoting enhanced collaborations among public development banks and stakeholders. By co-hosting and presenting at this event, Finance in Commons, the Development Bank of South Africa, and other institutions showcase their dedications and collected efforts towards addressing climate change challenges and achieving sustainable development goals. The interventions and discussions today are very informative and insightful and will inform the works of the G20 Sustainable Finance Working Group on the 2025 priorities. I fully agree with the convergence of climate finance and infrastructure development, particularly in the realm of adaptation finance across emerging markets and developing economies. Regarding enhanced collaboration among PDB, vertical funds, and private sectors to narrow the climate finance gap, several key issues have been highlighted at this conference. First, facilitate interoperability of taxonomies and achieve higher level of standardizations. Second, strengthen information sharing and enhance communications and coordination among PDBs, government agencies, and vertical funds. In this regard, country platforms would be critically important. Third, develop innovative financial instruments and mechanisms, including blended finance, de-risking mechanisms such as guarantee, insurance, etc. Fourth, take necessary policy measures to improve operations of PDB, as shown in the Finance in Commons survey, and to unlock more private capital, given limited physical space. 5, facilitate technical assistance and capacity buildings. Invest in capacity building initiatives to equip local authorities, financial institutions, and project developers with the necessary skills and knowledges. I think a lot of other things have been also mentioned, but I just highlight some of the key issues. These recommendations are very enlightening and helpful to developing countries and emerging economies. For example, China has leveraged its public development finance institutions and commercial banks in co-financing efforts with vertical funds, international and regional PDBs. However, the scale remains small. By implementing the recommendations mentioned above, we could create a more integrated and efficient finance ecosystem that leverage the strengths of all stakeholders and maximize the impact of co-finance development projects. In conclusions, I would like to express my gratitude to all the participants for their valuable contributions and insights during this conference. The discussions and exchange we have had today are instrumental in shaping the future of our financial collaborations and enhancing collaboration among public development banks and the stakeholders. I look forward to working with the SFWG members to reflect the discussions today in the SFWG report and recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Wang Shen. Let me echo his words to thank you everyone in the room and the 50 participants who joined us online for being part of this conversation. This brings us to the end. Thank you all very much for your time. Have a good day.
singing loud with our guitars so close. We can't go back from where we are, 'cause we're ocean.